What I want is
Oh iya.
together talk about research. So we do research. Of course, we cannot go into a class. We don't have enough time to design. So there are certain steps we take. I will have some videos so that we can look at what children do, our children's work. So there are different ways to do it. I just took over. Sorry. Are you really?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Bisa dibawa ke depan nggak?
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the second session of the workshop on design research. Yesterday we have conducted the first part of the workshop, and this is the second part. And this second part, we hope that we can learn further from Dr. Maarten Dolk, including about how to conducting design research as well as publishing results. How to publish the results regarding design research, either in conference, more importantly in journal. Because we are Indonesia, we are still struggling to increase the number of publications, the number of research results being recognized internationally. So we will have 45 minutes for you to present, and then we will continue 15 minutes for question and answer. If that's okay for you?
Well, it will be a little different because
that's okay.
The participants will have to do work.
That's okay.
On the workshop.
That's okay.
So maybe it is more an hour working and discussing together.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah.
So let's just do it for 1 hour, starting from now.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Let's give applause to Dr.
So you need a partner, and if you join us, please come up here up front. Design research. In our session, we are going to look for a specific part of mathematics. So I'm talking about data representation. Slowly, more and more countries, the understanding of data is part of the mass curriculum. It was not long time ago, but now we know better that in mathematics you have to be able to understand data. So you have to be able to understand graphs. You need to know what it means that a graph is. You need to be able to create graphs, you need to be able to read it. Because almost every bit of information nowadays is somehow given. I like to do this out one, so if that's okay, I ask people, and they say, I will use a microphone because they can see it. But if you can hear me, it's okay. If you cannot hear me, I will shout louder. I'm a teacher, I can shout. Understanding graphs, being able to read graphs, for the simple reason that you know that all information nowadays is condensed into graphs. So talk with your neighbor for a minute. What is important if you want to teach children, to help children understand how graphs work? What is it that children should start to understand? Talk to your neighbor for a minute. What is it that you need as a child to construct? What knowledge do you need if you want to be able to understand graphs? Talk to your neighbor. Make sure you have a neighbor, you have someone to talk to. Yeah, smart. Good if you have a neighbor, so that you have somebody to talk to. Or make a group of 3. Allow us to go back to our predictions. Remember, in a cycle, in a design research, you write down what you know. Well, I give you 2 minutes to write down what you know. That is, of course, not enough, because you do much longer time to really write down what you know. Then you design something. Well, I don't ask you to design, I give you the design, but in the design there is also the moment of predicting what you think children will do. The experiment, well, we did it in a class, so you don't do it, but I show you what happened, and then we're going to look back. And so that is more or less the process we are now going through. You talked for a very short time about what it is that you need to be able to understand graphs, and to be able to move it. I just repeat it because a few people came in. But in this investigation, the teacher introduced the story to the children. And the teacher said, this was done in a classroom in Canada, but it could be anywhere. And the teacher said, in this big city, people don't really have a garden, or some people like to grow fruit in the garden. And so there is a space, center of town, where people can grow their own fruits, their own vegetables, their own. And people take good care of those gardens. Each have a very small plot, so that's theirs. They want to make it nice, it must look good, they take care of it. She allows children to talk a little bit about the growing garden, what they like and what they don't like. Children will probably say they don't like a lot of the vegetables, because most children don't like vegetables, at least in the West. And then the teacher continued. She said, but at one moment something odd happened, because there was a big flower somewhere near the middle of the garden, and that popped up. And it looked intriguing, it was big. Did you plant it? Oh, did you plant it? No. Did you plant it? Where's this coming from? We don't know. And then they assumed, well, probably a bird flew over with the seed, or a squirrel brought the seed there, or an animal might have spread the seeds. What of course happens in reality too, that is how plants are moved around and growing all of a sudden in other areas. In Europe, a lot of plants are transported by the trucks along the highways. And so in Europe, you see that along the highways there are all kinds of flowers that do not really belong in the Netherlands, but that comes from Spain and are brought by trucks to the Netherlands. It's a new way of moving around flowers. So it's about biology at that moment. But that flower grew, and it was getting larger and larger, and people were intrigued by it. And it was one person who, at one moment, came the week before, went for his garden, and coincidentally he had a meter stick with him, and he measured the length. And that was 17 centimeters. And the next week, because this person comes regularly, the next week he came back and he measured the length of the plant, 36 centimeters. Wow! And a few weeks he couldn't come, too busy, couldn't tend for the garden, was not able to do things. And week 9 he comes back, the flower was almost this high. How is that even possible? And it's only week 9, so at the end of the summer, will it be 1 week? Can I go into the clouds? How tall will it be? Well, he again was very busy, and week 14 became 2 meter 53 centimeters. That's somewhere there. A week later, because he had time, a week later he came 2 meter 54. And had hardly grown anymore. And so the children talked about that. And then the teacher says, yeah, that whole process of what happened, do you think you can visualize that so that you better understand what was happening? Could you visualize that? And she gave him this large piece of paper, and if they wanted more paper, they had more paper. It was craft paper, it had blocks on it, large blocks. And so she said, work with your partner, visualize. These children were about 10 years old. Now, my task for you, come up with 2 or 3 different visualizations that you expect 10 years old would make. Talk to your neighbor, make together 2 or 3 visualizations where you say, I see 10 years old do that. Clear? Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Weeks. So that could happen.
an image a visualization that looks more or less the same. So a lot of us expect this kind of images. The y-axis was removed, they said. It was only the length. But compared to this group predicted that somehow the children would understand the length and would put a measurement down. Where are we? Here? Where is it? Maybe people said maybe they put it all on one line, where the indication of weeks and the indication of lengths are all merged together. And so that is visible here, but why is it not doing what I want? It's more or less also visible here. In this representation, the length is given, and the weeks are given kind of in curves on the side, while my machine is not really cooperating. Well, here the weeks are given on the y-axis and the lengths are given on the length of the plant, and there is no x-axis. So if I make it a little more formal, we expect that it is not an automatic for children to talk about a y-axis and an x-axis and to talk about variables, dimensions on each of those axes. If that is true, that means that that is a big step to go into that work. Now, the teacher walks around, and so I hope sound is doing it. I want to let you listen a little bit to a short conversation where the teacher helps children.
I'm seeing that you guys have these 3 lines in 3 different colors. So how come you have 3 different colors?
So it's more clear that these are different weeks and a different size of the sunflower.
Each sunflower changes the size, so it changes. So for different sizes we do different colors, and different weeks, different colors too.
Okay, because when I'm looking at it, it looks like we're talking about 3 different sunflowers. So that this sunflower grew up here, and this sunflower here, this sunflower here. So when we're looking at these lines here, because you have these lines that go, and you plotted them perfectly going up there. But you're saying that in week 1, or sorry, week 4, it had grown 17 centimeters. What does this line here, this blue line, what does it mean to you?
It's when in week 5 it goes 36 centimeters.
So in week 4 here, what does that part here? Like this is saying that at week 4.
All is 3 inches.
So what does this part of the line mean to us?
That this is how much more it grew.
Or this is how much it grew in week 1.
Oh, so it shows that we see increases.
And then if we
First of all, it's a representation that we had not expected. The children draw, let's say, a vector space to each of the growth moments that they know. They do have a y-axis, nicely put points in groups. The whole measurement, the whole ruler is visible on the y-axis. They have an x-axis, but they just treat the points and the connection between the points in a totally different way. So, let me show you some of the work that students do. This is a graph made by 2 students. On the x-axis, week 4, week 5, week 9, week 14, week 15. On the y-axis, the points 17, 36, 169, 253, 254. Now it becomes always interesting if you compare it to other children's work, because then you can start comparing what's really happening. This is life size. This was 2.5 meters. Because they wanted to do it, scaling back to a smaller size seems to be difficult for them. They made it really like it should look when they are there. What you see is that they more or less do what people here predicted. They kind of make all the points on one line. What is, of course, a form of representation, but what we know that we do in graphs is that we can compare how fast things move. We can see change in the difference between crows. That is not visible here anymore. And if you just compare it with this one, here you can say, oh, it grows faster, and here the growth is much, much slower. Now, that kind of information is lost here. Here we get y-axis, x-axis, and even arrows that somehow seem to indicate growth patterns. Here's an interesting one. So, I'll give you a minute to study it. What have these children done? In the mass congress that follows, one of the girls was not there. There were quite a number of people sick in school at the moment that we were filming, and so the next day not everybody was there. One of the girls is there, and she explains a little, and I will show the video so that we can listen to what the child is saying to explain what they have been doing.
So this is, the black letters, numbers, are how much it grew. So like 253 is 253 centimeters, and then the blue is like how it says 133 centimeters apart. It's like how far apart it is from these two numbers. And then this is the weeks they measured it. So they measured it the first time on the 4th week of their life, because it's measured to the number of 4. And these are to help you understand it better.
So why don't we determine
These are the lengths of the flowers, and that are the weeks to help us. No one of us even predicted that children might split the data apart. Look at the lengths on one side, look at the weeks on another side, don't combine the two. Even though the story was given as a combination, understanding that in data it is about a combination, the relation between data. It is not about data separate, is a big step. And so, what we now know, compared to before, is that the fact that you have to combine data sets, that you have to combine data in a data set and see it in relation to each other, is not an automatic for children. We need to find problems that will allow them to think about that. It continues, and I will come back to this later. If you compare this graph to this one, for instance, these children only write down 1786, 169. There is no 0 point on their scale. The distance between the points is not really precise. It's reasonably precise, but not too much. They try to make groups that really the unit is represented on the scale. They have a 0 on the y-axis, they don't have a 0 on the x-axis. These kids don't put the numbers down in a ratio. They have a 0 on the y-axis. But if you look at the growth pattern here, this seems to be a linear line. It grows just as much in every period. So they lost that sense of how the growth differs from week to week. They have not yet constructed that that is an important given in graphs, and that you can only do that if you scale this y-axis appropriately. And this is the drawing, the revisited drawing of those two girls that you just listened to, that after the conversation with the teacher, they removed each of the, I go too far, they removed each of the individual lines, and they made now one line trying to represent the crows. It is not showing the sunflowers anymore. Those first people are more or less doing what you predicted too. Their bars are really representing the flowers. It's just one step more abstract. But the flower is more or less still in their drawing. Of course, this is the most concrete one. And they already go more to a graph. The only question is the data really represented well? It's a different question. They have a 0 that is kind of nondescript. Is it the 0 on the y-axis? Is it the 0 on the x-axis? How is that working? And if you go through all the work of children, then all of a sudden you see this one, where this child has put the weeks in an appropriate scaling on the x-axis. In all the others, the x-axis was not scaled appropriately. And so children need to develop. If, for instance, you have this work in a conferral with children, the teacher could ask something like, what do you think will happen in week 16? What do you think the length was in week 7? Because there will be a lot of debate about how to interpret going to week 7. And it might force children to start scaling that x-axis. And that's, given the analysis of the work, that could be a very important next question. It could even be that the teacher give this assignment, have children work, and halfway the assignment, to help children to make the next step, says to the whole class, oh, I forgot one thing. You know, Mr. Amin, who made this chart, he says, I really wonder what happened in the weeks that I was not there. Do you think you can also help Mr. Amin in finding that? Because that might lead to children now starting to make the x-axis. That didn't happen in the class. What happened in class is that the children looked at each other's work. The teacher put all those works on tables and the children walked around and they made notes. And then they started what is called a mass congress. Different children show their work, talk about the work, and then there is a conversation. The teacher asks children to reflect on the work, to ask questions. So I will show you the whole conversation with this girl that we started and we saw earlier. I started at the beginning again, but now we listen to the whole conversation. And listen how polite children help each other.
So this is the black letter.
I will give you a chance.
Okay, I'm Wahyu from Lombok. At the first beginning of the task, did teacher encourage the students to draw the vertical or horizontal line, or just did the teacher, oh, this is the working paper, draw the growth of the sunflower?
The teacher only said, can you visualize the crows? There was no indication horizontal, vertical axis. She didn't even know. I mean, do we know whether children know the terminology? Probably not meaningful yet. Do you think that children know that is important? Most of you predicted that there would not be an y-axis. So she left that open. Of course, by giving the paper, she suggested more of a drawing. If you give blank paper, other things might work. If you give blocked paper, graph paper, then children can much easier look at measurement and make sure that one block is 10 or things like that. So that is where the support is. That's where the suggestions are. But she didn't suggest anything. She left it to the children. So the first child, and now this is a little more than, well, about 3.5 minutes. We hear the child talking, and then the teacher asks the other children to respond, to ask questions, and to react.
Numbers are how much it grew. So like 253 is 253 centimeters, and then the blue is like how it says 133 centimeters apart. It's like how far apart it is from these two numbers. And then this is the weeks they measured it. So they measured it the first time on the 4th week of their life, because there's it's measured to the number of 4. And these are to help you understand it.
So why don't we turn the doctor apart and see if we know what she did?
On the left, she
frustrated and how for explode?
5.
For the weeks, how do you the measurement? I disagree with it because you measured the weeks only, not like the actual height.
I measured the height of the peak. I measured the weeks only.
The actual weeks. It's not the number of the height that the sunflower grew. Because
Are you saying that they're not together, like being able to see both on the same picture, that you see the weeks on one graph and the numbers of the heights on the other? On aspect, is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Why did you measure on the other, where it was the centimeter numbers, why did you measure from top to bottom and not put 10 at the bottom and 300 centimeters at the top? Because that's not how numbers usually go up 5, they usually go from 10 above, not be measured and going down by 10. I really noticed that.
So that was actually really helpful, wasn't it? It's a nice insight. Yeah, gave you an idea of if you were to do it, revise it, which as mathematicians we can always do, right?
Two important things that appear in the discussion is where the boy talks about, yeah, but you put the lengths and the weeks in two different graphs. Why do you do that? And at this moment they don't really talk about that extensively. And you see, he made a graph where the two are related. But it is very difficult for him to put it in precise words to say what it is that he is missing here. And later on in the discussion it will come back to that. And the other thing is, yeah, on a number line, we normally order numbers from 0 somewhere below to, and that is, if you make a graph and you have the 0 on top and then you go down, makes the graph interesting but harder to read. At least it's not what we are used to. And so the second girl, very friendly, says, why do you do that? Now, these of course become attention points for this girl and for some other people in the rest of the conference to look at graphs and to see that it is done differently, to listen to it, that it is done differently. And in this Congress, because there were so many different pieces of paper work, and there are so many, and we wanted to videotape it. Kathy Vosno, the colleague to whom I work, was sitting on the floor with the children. The teacher was also sitting with the children, so that the two girls, or the girl on front, or the kids on front, really the kids talked to that child and not to the teacher. And because we wanted good discussion on tape, we did more posters than we normally do. We had 6 posters being discussed. And here come the 2 boys who made that real long poster. And you can see how long it is. It is life size. And the discussion is, of course, that it is all in one line. And why did you make it in one line? And so the discussion here, in a way, for us mathematically, is about why don't you use an x-axis? And that comes back to your question. You don't have to say it because you more or less can predict that it will be part of the Congress. It will be part of the discussion amongst children. And that is why the variety of work is so important. That is why we want to create a problem that really allows that. So now our theory, if this is design research, our theory contains elements. How the heck do you make a scale? Because the scale goes from bottom to top. You have to scale it appropriately, but not all the children scale appropriately. You have to use a 0 point. Those are all elements of our theory. You have to use an x and a y-x to represent the relationship between the two data sets, between the two data. So our theory that we developed gets richer and richer. And a part of the theory was what we knew before we started, but a part is probably what we developed during the research. Next came the boy who, his partner was also sick, the boy who had not scaled the y-axis, and that this looks like one line. It did not represent crows anymore. And the children said, yeah, but earlier we talked about that it at one moment grows very fast and the other moment, and you don't show that. Oh, how can we show that? And then in his, of course, that change in growth speed is more represented. But he still doesn't have a scaled, why do I do that every time? A scaled x. So, now we go to these curls, very nicely done by x, but still no scale on the x-axis. And here we go to these curls, who, as we know, have both the y and the x-axis nicely scaled. And they have something that looks like the 0, 0 point. And no. So, in a way, what happened is that the intervals, the 2 dimensions, the 0, 0 point, the scales, intervals using ratio, all that was more or less discussed by the group. It doesn't mean that children immediately understand it. You need to continue. But it is a start. Now, if this is what happens in a design research, your next problem is, what do I do tomorrow? Because if this is being discussed, and I know that I want to continue having children think about this, I now have to come up with an assignment that will force them to do that again. So talk to your neighbor. What would you do tomorrow? What would your next assignment be?
Yoi.
Is wrong. And so they show all kind of graphs where there are difficulties, where children now have to rediscuss how to create a better graph. And they did this design, you don't write this the first day. they know a lot about the theory. So writing down the knowledge was easy for them because they had done already so much in the field. They know children, they know the development of children, they know the theory as we have written it, the difficulties, but still you have to test and to see whether it works or not. And personally, I think this is a beautiful problem. It allows so much of the difficulties that children encounter to be discussed and to reinvent the mathematics. And you can also see it is totally different from traditional education. Because in traditional education, the teacher says, if you have a set of data, what you have to do is, you draw y-axis, you draw an x-axis, and put the numbers down right. Don't forget the 0, 0, please, don't forget it. And now put the numbers in. And be sure that will not help your children. It takes more time. Teachers always say, yeah, but this teaching takes more time. Yes, it takes more time. But you don't have to repeat it 25 times. That teacher who is shouting how to do it, 3 weeks later he or she will shout a little louder, and a year later they will repeat the same sentence again, even louder, and a little later they will repeat it again, and I cannot reach that point, but they would say it even louder. And here you know that children develop it a much better understanding. And the good thing is that if a year later they're still making this kind of mistakes, you can say, do you remember? And most contexts are something children do remember. Do you remember that we did that? And it impacts more or less what children have been doing. Going back to the design research, we now have elements of our theory. So now I can write about what I knew, I can write about why I designed it this way, I can write about what the kids did, I can write about my findings. So my findings are my theory, my local theory, because it was only in my class, my local theory about how the development of children copes if I give this problem. And my local theory will contain more or less written this kind of points, and the examples will be in the difficulties that children have. So I will say, oh, the 0, 0 point, and then I will talk about why children don't do that 0, 0 point, and I will have a dialogue where I confer with children about 0, 0 point. And so the theory is also always splashed with elements of my classroom research. It is theory and an example of a dialogue with children about what I did. So that the people who read it, read the theory, but they also see children at work. And in children at work, you know, oh, that is how it goes in the classroom. And when they read about one child, they can, as a reader, they can put their own children in place. Oh yes, she would do that too. Oh yes, he would say that too. Now, that is the level of convincing that is needed. Okay, I think I have to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. So we open for discussions, question and answer. Please, two questions at the front.
Okay. I did the design for the first time for my math thesis under the supervision of neurological and programming. I'm not the information students, so I start from the zero to learn the design. I would like to share my reflection, what I did in my thesis. In terms, the first is in terms of, I did the teaching experiments. The first involved 6 students, and the second experiment involved the whole class for 25 students. I did the topic is fraction diffusion. Specifically, I would like to say about particle fraction diffusion. For example, half divided by 2. And at the first teaching experiment, I can control the 5 or 6 students. I mean, I can understand we are discussing, we are observing what they do. But on the other context, comparing to the size of the class is so vast that there's a more, I mean, that's a ideal number of students, so we can, with the video recording and so on, we can observe them. But in my case, in the second experiment, with the limited video recordings, and then I only use one focus group. I divided the 25 students into 5 groups, but only I deeply focus on one group. I know what actually happened in the focus group, and the science is working. I mean, for the high student and lower ability students. But however, when I give them a post-test after several cycle of lessons, and I found that the 25 students could not do well in that post-test. I mean, my question, maybe my reflection also is to what extent the design, the learning we design to support all the students. Meanwhile, in my cases, I only focus on one focus group. And the other thing that I thought in the process that, oh, many students are already behind for this. And the second reflection is, in case of, for example, a student is doing one master thesis with my invitation, and also my lecture asked me in the final thesis class how representative is the group to represent all the students. That's my reflection until now I'm seeking the question. Thank you.
Class size is different in different countries. There are richer schools where the class size is 12. I've been in classes with 50 children here. I've been in Bangladesh where a secondary grade teacher was teaching 110 children. I'm not sure how you can teach 110 children. In a research setting, of course, you want to make it doable. So you want to create a situation where you can research. 25 children, sometimes it's very wise to do what you do. I focus one group. And I hope that that group is slightly representative. Now, if that group is totally different from your first test group, then there is something to debate. Because either it is because I changed my research so dramatically, my design so dramatically that it needed to be different, or I cannot talk about any representation. Second, you do have all the written work of students. So you can look whether the written work of this group is similar to all the written work of the others, or whether it is totally different. And that gives you also an indication of whether your group is more or less. Now, information is, what you have is indeed what the group discussed while they're doing it. It is information what happens when a teacher walks over and converses with children. But it's also the information what you get when they are talking about their work with the whole group. So there are more moments in class than only that 5 group that you observed. And you have to make sure that you can explain if or if not those give you the same information. If it is the same information, it makes your observation stronger. If it is not the same observation, you have to do explanations. So the fact that you only observe one group is not a problem by itself. However, we need to work on explaining that that is representative. And there was a good question of your supervisor, you have to answer that. And that is not easy, but research is never easy, definitely not if you just begin. Now the second question, of course. It's all, okay. We have 3 minutes, they said, but we just answer your question.
Okay, I am Dia from Chicago. Well, I entered the design research is in this years, and I don't know before about the design research. So, and then I have a very lot of questions here, how to do this and how can I make it and how could be the setting of the classroom, and that's why I learned it, but I still get confused and what is the difference with the class action research, and when I have to stop that, okay, I fit with design. I fit with my design. So I will stop here right now, right there. And then I found a lot of qualitative then in this design research. Is that correct?
Design research is, to a large extent, of course, qualitative. Because you have all kinds of data, sentences of children, utter, reflections between children, you get written word from children, you get faces that children draw when somebody says something in class and the others, oh, is that true? I mean, that is all kind of data. What you don't get is just numbers. If you do an exit test after, and then you can put data down. You can say 75% of my children scored well or didn't score well. But you can also make a test so that you measure more the quality of their responses. So there is a difference between a test where you say a half divided by a fourth is, or if you say Siti was working on this problem, do you think she is doing it right or wrong? Can you finish her work? And now you put something down where there is a certain error. And the error is one of the things that you discussed. And you think that the children know it. Now, you get more data, because it's not an answer question anymore, but it is also something where children have to explain something. Yeah? She looked at a quarter, but she's using the wrong hole. Hey, they think that the whole matters with fractions. Maarten talked about too. So there are moments where even in an exit test you can make it more about the quality of their thinking than only whether they do it right or wrong. And so a design research is definitely quantitative research. I will be around, feel free to talk, but I think we have to stop.
That's correct. Yes, correct. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for all of your attention, and it was very interesting, intriguing, lovely, wonderful design research, as well as how to write our results into publications. Dr. Maarten Dolk just mentioned to us that how to conduct design research, and then what we knew, and why we designed the research in such a way, and then how the students react, what our results are, and then we can just write that or those all into a research paper. And as Dr. Maarten Dolk said, he will be around here, but unfortunately it's time for break. We need to have lunch, and for you, brothers and sisters who are Muslim, you need to have Salat Jumat prayer, and the committee will guide you to the place where you can take the prayer. So,
Okay,
in conclusion, we give applause to Dr. Maarten Dolk. Thank you very much.